Welcome to the Lessons from the Leap podcast, where we showcase visionary entrepreneurs and leaders, sharing their incredible journeys and inspiring stories. Let's dive into the show.
Hello and welcome to Lessons from the Leap. I'm your host, Gazanfer Mansoor. On this show, I get to sit down with entrepreneurs, founders, and business leaders to talk about bold decisions, pivotal moments, and innovative ideas that shape their journeys. This episode is brought to you by Technology Rivers. At Technology Rivers, we bring innovation through technology and AI to solve real-world industry problems. If you want to learn more about us, head over to technologyrivers.com and tell us more about your project. Today on Lessons from the Leap, we have an amazing guest, Jason Carroll, founder of Aptive Index. And I'll let Jason introduce himself. Jason, tell us anything you want our listeners to know.
Sure. Yeah, before Aptive Index, had quite a bit of a typical founder's journey. Dropped out of college because I thought I knew better myself. Had a couple of startups, one that failed at the same time. My biggest competitor was selling for $125 million. So I call that my $125 million mistake. But most recently, prior to this new venture, I was the head of a company called Champion National Security. And during that time, I was there for 7 years and we grew from 20 million to 80 million. And then I had a successful exit just a few years ago. And that's really where I learned the most about myself, self-awareness, growth, leadership, and the most about really how to better run a business, how to build a better culture. And it was also during that time that I got introduced to what's called psychometrics, which is like basically personality assessments on steroids. Totally changed the game for me. And as such, after the exit, when I explored what I'm going to do next, I got into the world of psychometrics and built Aptive Index as a result.
Oh, thanks for sharing. So you have a diverse careers from tech to scaling a security company to founding Aptive Index. When you look back, what's the story that ties your journey together?
Just trying to innovate, disrupt, even prior to my own ventures, when I was even in my 20s, I was always starting new divisions of whatever company I'd be a part of or inventing a new role. I don't know if you've heard the term intrapreneur, but I think that really described who I was early on. And now I think I'm a real entrepreneur now that I'm out on my own and actually profitable. Hopefully that sticks. But yeah, just the constant curiosity and desire to shape and innovate, I think has been the common thread.
Cool. And what was the moment that sparked Aptive Index? Was it a 600,000 hiring mistake, or was it something?
Oh yeah,
you were building
it's almost
before?
like you're cheating, and you saw that on my profile. One of the hiring mistakes I made was a $600,000 mistake. It was very costly, and when I talk about that dollar amount, I mean actual P&L, like dollars. Who knows how much more expensive it was? We've all hired a dud or had somebody who worked out for 6 months and then failed. And we know that the cost of that mishire far exceeds their salary most of the time, especially in leadership roles. And the psychometrics, the behavioral assessments came into play partly because of that. That was kind of the final nail in the coffin. But even prior to that, I had this guy, amazing guy, doing ops for me. And because he was amazing at ops and I needed somebody as kind of like my second, if you've heard of EOS, they use terminology like visionary and integrator. I'm the visionary and I wanted an integrator. And I thought, hey, this guy has been running ops for a decade. I bet he's the right guy. And while he is and was amazing, he was not the right fit for that leadership role. He was too opposite me. And so he couldn't keep up with my pace. I couldn't see where he was coming from. And we ended up just butting heads a lot instead of partnering to innovate. And it was during that time I got introduced to these psychometric assessments. And when I saw from a scientific data standpoint what was actually going on, it was just like all the light bulbs that could go off went off. And I, felt like I was awake and seeing people in just a far more profound way than I had ever seen them. And of course, part of my journey is self-awareness. I started turning that inward as well and looking at my own behaviors and drives and everything else, and realizing that there were things that I needed to work on, more so than I needed to work on other people on my team.
So can you help us? Can you dig a little bit more further into Aptive
Sure.
Index? Like how does it really work? So for for the CEOs, for the hiring managers, and for the applicants. So
Yeah, what we're
any detail you
measuring.
can give, that would be great.
Yeah, if you've seen things like Myers-Briggs or DISC, or which Harry Potter house am I, these personality tests that are out there, they range anywhere from a silly online quiz all the way to being scientifically validated, which is the realm we play in. DISC and Myers-Briggs, those are helpful, but they're not scientific. They're not validated in any meaningful way, because it's more about personality, and personality shifts and adapts over time. We're looking at hardwired drives. What is the motivating drive behind my behavior? And by measuring that, we can look at somebody and tell really quickly where they are going to fit really well and where they might struggle. It doesn't mean that they won't do well, but again, your listeners, we've probably all seen a really good salesperson, like had the right wiring to be sales, and then we promote that person to a sales leader and they fail miserably. And we just go, what happened there? We look at the traits, the drives that will actually tell us what might be going on there. That person is maybe a fantastic relationship builder because they're driven by the need for connection and belonging. They might be a great kind of like move forward and move fast because they have a really high internal intensity. But then we translate those things to leading other people, and it turns out they're not very strategic. They have no detail bone in their body, right? So they're not reporting the way they need to. They're not holding people accountable. And so that's kind of like part of the concept. Another really easy one is to think, that salesperson, the person who's great at sales, would probably hate being an accountant. And we know that intuitively. What we're doing is measuring the proof behind why that's actually the case. And so if we can know where somebody's going to thrive and where somebody's going to be miserable, we can place the right people in the right seats. Or we can even look at a job role definition and know that we have a great person in that seat, but they're misaligned, and we can actually realign them by redefining what that role looks like for them, what the expectations are, who they report to, all kinds of stuff like that. And it leads to better engagement, leads to better retention, less turnover. It leads to more productivity. We're able to resolve conflict between people because of this behavioral data. Heck, we have a client who says that we literally saved his marriage, and he's not exaggerating. This is powerful behavioral data combined with AI that really changes the game.
Cool. So, we all have used different tools, and you already mentioned Myers-Briggs and DISC and all of those, and they all do different things. Like DISC, I have used DISC, Predictive Index, Culture Index, Colby, 16 personalities, all of those.
Yeah.
So Culture Index obviously does more of a, I would say, it's at least in our companies, we have used that a lot. So
yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about comparison with Culture and Predictive?
Yeah. So I love that you mentioned those two. Yeah. So Colby is a different kind of flavor compared to what we're doing. But our similarities with Colby are that we are measuring conative attributes. It's CONATIVE. It's part of where the aptive, APTIVE, it's part of where that name comes from, which are more like our internal instinct, drive, volition. It's those hardwired traits, versus like the DISC and Myers-Briggs are looking at contextual personality. Like you get a lot of Myers-Briggs people who, have like E for extrovert, but that's not actually what's driving them. Anyways, that sidebar. But culture index, predictive index are similar to us in that it's a free choice assessment versus a forced choice. So forced choice is like, here's the question, here are the 4 things you need to choose from, and you have to choose one of these. And if you don't like any of them, tough luck. So free choice is going to be more accurate in a lot of ways because you're not selecting things that are actually inaccurate to how you would assess them yourself. The difference, I would say, if you or if your audience is familiar with either of those solutions, first of all, bravo for using a solution because they are great. Like I can't imagine hiring anybody for any company of any size without a tool like one of these. There are a couple of fundamental differences. One is that they're using decades old science. Both of those companies are. They haven't updated their methodology, their algorithms, their adjective selections, their questions. They haven't done anything. They haven't tweaked or improved in decades, which is weird because science evolves and we learn more. And, we're at Aptive, we are very committed to staying up to date. So that's one kind of just fundamental difference. The other piece is the application. Pretty much every assessment on the market, including those, which again are fantastic platforms, they are used very heavily up front. You get a chart or a PDF or something, and you're like, great, I can make a decision with this to make a better hiring choice or something like that. And then it really collects dust. It takes a real power user who gets mildly obsessed with these platforms to really get any more out of it beyond that initial putting the right person in the right seat. And because of the advent of AI, we have our own custom AI. It's called Aria. And she's like a behavioral psychologist in your pocket, always available, smarter than any advisor you would hire, smarter than me as the founder of my company, as far as how we take this behavioral data and make it a daily strategic tool. So hiring is maybe 20 or 30% of what our clients are using this for. It's a huge ROI, so keep doing it, obviously. But it's, hey, Gazenfer and Jason are having some conflict. Like, what's going on here? How do we help them resolve that? Or, Lizzie is doing well in these areas of sales, but she's struggling on the negotiation side. How can we coach her in that? Anything like that, anything your imagination can come up with of, if I had a behavioral psychologist and a Simon Sinek and a Brene Brown on speed dial who knew all of my people more intimately than their therapist does, what would I ask that person? And you just go nuts with the AI. And it really is, it's kind of insane. It's next level.
Cool. Yeah, and you mentioned Brené Brown. So as a Dare to Lead facilitator trained by Dr. Brené Brown, how has that shaped your approach to leadership assessments?
Man, big time. She has been a pretty incredible force in my life, not just as an author and speaker and TED Talker and Netflix special and all the things that she's got going on. I got to meet her and spend a few days getting trained by her back in 2019. And, I was in a room with people that came in from all over the world. And her work on courage and curiosity and vulnerability is really transformative. It sharpens those, I guess, what people call soft skills, which is a really bad branding, if you ask me, because that's the social intuition. It's the emotional intelligence. It's the ability to build resilience and to have self-awareness. Like, all those things add up to be, in my opinion, a far bigger indicator of leadership quality than skills, experience, and even hardwiring and what we're measuring. So we don't measure these EQ soft skills, but we do show indications of where people are going to thrive and where they're going to struggle. And that's really important to the growth of a leader if a leader is committed to these skills that again, in my opinion, are maybe one of the most paramount to success.
So how do you merge that, like the emotional intelligence, vulnerability data, but without losing the human side of the leadership?
Well, I think the emotional intelligence is the human side of the leadership. I look at, and I'll pick on myself. I've got this profile and the way my attributes line up of somebody who always wants to be in charge, barely pauses to ask what anybody else thinks, processes emotions so fast that I lose track of the fact that people around me are actually feeling a way. And I move at, Tesla performance model, foot to the floor speed at all times. So I leave people in the dust. I steamroll my leadership team in meetings. Like these are things that I started noticing about myself back in like 2016, 17, and so on. And I started looking at like, if I'm steamrolling my team, but that was my first I just had a data point. It's like I'm steamrolling my executive team. But then I realized that's not true self-awareness. Like that's just data put in a spreadsheet. It doesn't help anybody. I had to confront the impact of that behavior, which is if I'm steamrolling my team, I've got valuable members that have been around with this company for a decade who don't feel like I value their contributions, their ideas, their input. They don't feel like they have a voice, which means they're disengaging, they're doing lower quality work, they're not inspiring other people that they lead. So there's a ripple effect of my negative behaviors at play. And it sounds like simple to talk about, but in that moment of confronting the negative impact, that's where that Brene Brown work really comes in, because it requires a level of vulnerability, courage, and addressing like the shame gremlins. Because one of the most natural things when we say, oh, hey, this behavior is hurting people, one of the first reactions is defensiveness, right? Like, let's shift blame, or let's say now something else is going on, or like that's just me. Like, you can't be upset because I'm just being me. I'm a leader, right? And so we'll either deny or shift blame, or we'll confront it, but that shame will enter in. Like, well, why do I do this? And we'll give ourselves answers like, oh, I must just be a really terrible leader. I'm a bad person. And like none of these things are helpful because they don't lead to change. They don't lead to growth. So that's, to me, where all of this comes full circle is you look at the behaviors, you understand what the impact is, you confront it head on with emotional intelligence, resilience, self-awareness, avoiding things like self-blame or blaming others. And then you shift into the change. And the change happens by understanding what's driving the behavior. And that's where we come into play. We're going to tell you empirically why or like kind of what's driving those behaviors. And if we know what's driving them, we can reframe those drives and those needs into different behaviors that have a better outcome and better impact, but still fill that drive. Does that track? Does that make sense?
Yep. Yeah. No, that's good. Thanks for sharing that. So I'm going to switch gear, going back to the Champion National Security place where, so you scaled that company from 20 million to 80 million before selling. What was one key thing that was done that made that growth?
That people are humans. That's it. The previous founder had a mentality of pay people as little as you can, throw them to the curb when they don't do well. When things go wrong, you yell, you cuss, you send all caps emails, that kind of thing. We came in and this is an industry that was an industry that is low hourly wage, blue collar work. And these people were treated like garbage throughout the entire industry, not just that founder, although he was part of the problem. And we said, let's treat people with worth and value. And so when we came up with our core values, the number one was people matter much. That's it. Let's conduct from top down with the core belief that people matter much. Our turnover plummeted, our overtime hour expenses plummeted, our customer satisfaction rose, we started making decisions based on that. We had a client, like our third largest client, we fired. They were bringing in a lot of money, but it was just revenue and it was treating our people like garbage. And we said, that's not like, we tried to work with them to change things around and they wouldn't. We said, all right, goodbye. So we started making pretty much every major decision based on, does this direction match our core values? And that was the chief core value, was that people matter.
People matter. That's the keyboard. So I'm curious, the Aptive Index, have you seen any different feedback or different outcome in different cultures, because nowadays companies have remote workers all over the world.
It's true.
We have people in 7 different countries, and we've seen like different results depending on how people respond, especially in a certain cultures where even when people are responding to questions, they want to look perfect. So that means the input is not really what the real person is. Not always, but
Yeah.
Have you seen those differences in different people from our different cultures?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things that to unpack there. One, the languages that we translate into, we're translating based on context. So it's not word for word. In fact, there's not even the same number of words being used that people select from. The questions aren't just word for word. So that's actually a big deal because sometimes we see from our competitors an inaccurate response because the people in these other countries are either taking it in English, which is not their native language, or they're using a translated version that isn't contextually correct. So that issue happens. However, what you're saying is something we do see, which is a kind of a global shift on certain attributes based on the culture or the region that we're recruiting from. However, there's still more to unpack there. So like in the United States, there are no correlations between age, gender, sex, ethnicity, or gender, sex, that's the same thing, but like there's no correlations. So when we see that there are correlations, when we go recruiting from another country, we have to ask what's going on. And our data is only anecdotal, but like we have clients that recruit from the Philippines, but they're almost exclusively recruiting virtual assistants. Well, that is a different pool of type of person than, I'm here recruiting for a CTO or a salesperson or something like that. We have clients that we recruit from a bunch of different countries in Central America. And it's the same kind of thing. Like it's a more specific niche role that's the most common that they're recruiting for. So I can't say empirically that there is a difference between different countries and cultures, because I think that it's as much to do or maybe more to do with the type of role that we're recruiting for.
And have you seen any differences even here in the United States in terms of people like white collar or blue collar, or
Actually,
the results are consistent?
Yeah, the results are consistent across all like socioeconomics and role, I guess like authorities or what like job level basically. And even across, I mean, I can't say any of the names, but we've got some big athletes and some athletic groups that are bringing us in like to the entire team. So the coaches and the players, these players, we have no idea what their future job is going to be. They're sports, they're basketball players and football players. And there's still the results can be all over the place.
Okay. People change along the way. So obviously Aptive Index is new, but have you seen any pattern, let's say somebody assessed today versus, and then maybe 6 months, a year, how that behavior changed? And does that impact anything?
Yeah. So what we say so we have 8 attributes total, 4 that we consider the primary conative, and then 4 that are kind of a standalone or secondary. Of the 4 primary, the language we use is that they will shift, but they're not going to change. So like somebody who has a high drive for details and accuracy and standards, that's a person that they're hardwired. When they see something wrong, they have a visceral reaction, like it hurts inside. Do you know what I mean? And that's not something that's just going to go away. Right? They might learn to cope with that and not be, as impacted by it. But 20 years from now, when they see a typo, they're still gonna they're still gonna hate that there's a typo. And so those types of drives don't change, but they might shift over time. The standalone attributes are a little different in that, we haven't seen drastic changes, but we also haven't really we don't need to validate those the same way. And so if we see shifts there, it's not really a concern, because they're more about your style, cognitive style, emotional style, things of that nature. And those things can shift a little more readily.
Okay. So if you can give every leader one behavior to practice this week, that would move them forward, what would that be?
Gosh, without knowing, their profile, that's harder. But I think just behavior in general is to get curious. Go watch the dart scene from Ted Lasso. Have you seen that show?
No,
Oh
not
man,
yet.
look, there's a great scene where the main character, Ted Lasso, gets into this dart throwing battle with kind of the bad guy club owner or whatever. And he gets into this whole rant about just being curious. Like, when you are curious about what's going on in other people's lives and worlds, you tend to be less judgmental. You tend to make less mistakes. You tend to explore more possibilities of how things could be. And so, yeah, if I had to choose right here on the spot, I'm going to say get curious more often this week than you were last week.
So AI is becoming a major part, obviously, everywhere, and so is your product. So when you talk to people, I'm sure there are always questions, pushback. So what's the biggest misconception you have heard from the CEOs, founders, or whoever the people you deal with about using AI for people decisions?
The CEO group doesn't really give much pushback. It's when we get to the HR group that we start hearing more whispers of concern. And I totally understand the concerns. The AI is trained and restricted so that it's giving you a better understanding of how people are wired and where they might thrive, where they might have growth areas, but it's not telling you what to do. Because I also don't think that an AI should be making people decisions for us. It's one thing to say, Joe is going to, potentially struggle with follow through on these types of things. It's another thing for AI to say, "Oh, don't hire Joe," or you should fire Stacy. Ugh, I don't like that. But that is the concern we hear. Is Aria going to tell us that we just need to fire everybody, or and no. And if you somehow trick it into telling you that, you've signed our AI policy. That is not what you're supposed to be doing at all. And so I think that's really the main concern: is, are we compliant? Is this legal? Is it telling us something that is going to harm people? And and this behavioral data is powerful. You can, even without AI, if you really understand it, you can use it to manipulate people. And I would imagine you could probably ask AI the right question that kind of skirts around the rules to get it to give you tips on how to influence or manipulate somebody. So I have no doubt that there's going to be a nefarious user at some point. And I don't like that, but there's nothing we can really do about it. And I haven't seen it yet.
Okay, coming back to how the assessments impact. So different assessments behave differently, I would say, fail to capture how someone behaves under pressure. So any thoughts on that? whether it's Aptive or in general, why the output is different and what's the best way to address that?
It's interesting. I don't think that we fail to, I can't answer for the others. But I think that we actually do get a lot of insight on how people perform under pressure. How, with the caveat of what we can predict how they might act, but it really depends on how emotionally intelligent that person is. Like, do they have coping strategies, for example? And I guess to be fair, I don't measure that. So I guess I don't know if that person is equipped with resilience, emotional control, or whatever that might be. So I guess I'm kind of reneging on my own answer because yeah, that's true. We don't measure that, and so we just kind of have to pry as we're in our interview process, as we're talking to people, coaching the folks that are already on our team to uncover what that might look like.
Cool. Just a couple of more quick questions. Well, like any red flags do people often miss during the interviews? Obviously, now assessments are becoming big and now AI based, so obviously things are different than it used to be.
Yeah.
Any red flags do you see people still missing,
I mean, I
even
think
while
that,
using these?
yeah, well, I mean, the biggest red flag is not using some other leg of the stool. You cannot trust resumes. They're all written by ChatGPT. They people lie on resumes, admittedly. So, and even if they were 100% true and written by the human, skills and experience is one of the worst predictors of success. It tells us almost nothing. Formal education is the same. So relying too heavily on someone's past experience or supposed skills is a huge mistake that still is made with or without assessments. With assessments as one leg of the stool, gosh, I'm trying to think what like a red flag would be. I guess maybe over relying, overcompensating, and saying, "Oh, look, these metrics don't line up the way we wanted to." And even though they have great referrals and a great resume and everything, and did really well in the interview, we're not going to move forward. I don't hear my clients saying that, but I think that would be, if that's happening, an over reliance on the assessment results and not recognizing that these things are flawed. Like 80, 90% accurate, but that means we're not always right, and we shouldn't pretend to be.
So, what's next for Aptive? What next for you? Well, can you share some plans if
Yeah,
there are?
Aptive is growing very quickly, very, very quickly. It's kind of like that hockey stick growth right now, which is excellent. We are moving into spaces like I was talking about, the sports teams. We have multiple Division I athletics clubs we're talking to the point where spinning up a whole nother division for Aptive performance. And that's really exciting. Probably January, February, we'll have some big names and faces on video and things that we can show. That's super cool. For me, I love building. I love problem solving with my clients. I'm going to keep making sure that this is the best solution on the market. I keep retraining Aria. I mean, I just gave her some pretty cool upgrades in her knowledge base yesterday. It's a constant improvement thing. And so I think 2 years from now, 3 years from now, I'm probably putting somebody else in the CEO spot to keep the strategic scale and growth going on so that I can have side projects. I can focus on product. And I think that's probably what's next for me.
Cool. Thanks. So, thanks, Jason. Thanks for sharing your experiences. It's so wonderful to hear from you, and the success that you have gone through at the Aptive Index is going through that crazy growth. Thanks for sharing your experiences with our audience. One last thing before is there, how do listeners connect with you? What is the best way? Is it LinkedIn? Is it email? Just
Yeah,
share,
LinkedIn
and
is
we will
great.
put it in our podcast information.
Yeah, I think LinkedIn is probably the easiest. Jason P. Carroll, two R's, two L's. There's too many other Jason Carrolls, so you have to throw the P for Paul or Peter or whatever I don't know what the things are. But yeah, Jason P. Carroll, find me on LinkedIn. That's the best way to connect.
Cool. Thanks, Jason. Thanks again for
Yeah.
being an amazing guest on Lessons from the Leap. Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of the day.
Thank you for tuning in to the Lessons from the Leap podcast. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. We'll catch you next time.